Hello and welcome to the first episode of Inside the Majors podcast, presented by Kinetic Racing. I'm your host, Wade Hayes. Joining me today are John King, fellow Kinetic Racing co-founder, and Majors Series founder, Michael Lett. A bit later in the show, we'll be joined by Steve Driscoll from Unorthodox Racing. Our show comes to you today from the famous Circuit de Spa, where last chance qualifying for European and American regions is just about to get underway. Well, welcome to the show, Mike and John. I see that we have a bit of technical difficulties right off the bat. That's okay, we'll get that fixed. New for me, it's the first time I've ever done this. I think it's new for everybody else. We'll figure it out. While I figure out the technical issues, Mike, why don't we just hit you with a hard question? Who should we be looking out for in this session?
Well, just looking at the driver list for the last qualifier of the week, looks like Matthew Thunhorst is putting in his time right now. He's third in the championship standings in Americas, so I would say for sure him, and it looks like Alliance has got some good stuff under him this week as well. I see that Trevor Clement is third in qualifying so far, so I would expect Matthew to be really strong. Also, Riley Thompson is in the Euro region. He hasn't had the year he would want, but he's really fast, especially on anything road base. He actually came in second in the Atlantic region last year, just barely fell short of the championship actually. So, and at 15 years old, pretty impressive. So those are the two guys I would be watching times on so far. I'm sure we'll have more guys join here shortly. Yeah, really good. We've had 120, basically right on the nose, 120 drivers at least make some laps in practice so far, which means they're still in the running to potentially get a grid spot for tomorrow in Americas and Euro. We had a lot more than that sign up, so we still have some folks that signed up didn't participate in practice yet and probably won't. That's okay. But it will have at least two splits in both regions, and they'll be pretty darn full splits. So that'll be great. So we're looking at like 50 plus cars in both regions for both splits. So everybody's going to get a good race, which is excellent. And then last night in international, we had 50 exactly. So that was really, really good, really strong. Last year in the same race, we ended up with 140 total drivers. This year, we're probably going to go over 200 easily. So probably closer to 230, 240. So that's really good to see. No, we're close. So 2 rounds ago at Le Mans was the largest we've ever had at largest this year at 277. Largest we've ever had is 300 exactly, and that was the Daytona 500 last year. So this one won't get to 277, I don't think, so we won't have our biggest one of the year, but it'll be really close. Now, the cool thing, at least to me, is that normally, we've been doing this since 2014. The most populated races are always the first couple of the year because everybody's excited. And that's with any racing series or official or league or anything you see. It's always at the front end of the series or the season where all the population comes in. And that's been true for us historically too. Daytona 500 and Daytona 2.4 are always really popular. And again, that's A, they're really popular events, and B, they're at the beginning of the season. So that makes sense. What's been really neat to see is that we've had 2 of our last 3 races sort of approach those races in terms of attendance. So that really is a good sign.
That's great. It's healthy for the season. Healthy for, as a competitor, it's great to have these big. I want to go against the best of the best, and not only that, but just having the wide spectrum of skill levels and the ability to know that if you sign up for the league and you show up and maybe you're not quite ready for the top split, that there will be a place for you to race and a place for you to race with people. It's one of the best things about
Yeah, cool. That echoes my thoughts too. That's one of the things that we strive for, is that everybody's got a place to race, and that the racing will be good wherever you are. And obviously, it takes numbers to get to that point. And the more numbers you get, that brings in new challenges and problems that we're frankly working on for how we set things up for next season. But we adapt and grow, and hopefully we do keep growing. So that's cool.
Yeah, so while we're on growth and bigger numbers, it seems the international region has really taken off this year compared to the past few seasons. You're starting to fill grids and get second splits. And while we're talking about that, how did the international race go yesterday?
Yeah. So
wait, can I just interrupt? The guys on the YouTube channel are saying that they can't hear you, Wade.
Yep, I think I got that figured out too. Just a few technical issues as we start.
Okay, go on, Mike.
Sorry, no problem. If they can hear me, I guess that's a miracle. I'm usually quiet, but no, 50. Like I said, we had 50 drivers exactly in international last night, which was the second largest number ever for an international region. It didn't split. But that's just because we can have so many drivers in a single split at Spa. But we have had multiple races split this year. It's the first time that that's happened. And yeah, we're nearly double. For example, last year at Spa we had 22 drivers in international. This year we had 50. That's really exciting. I mean, the goal is to get to where, for all the regions, that you've got minimum two strong splits. In order to have two strong splits all year round, you have to have the most popular races need to have 3, 4, or 5 splits. That's always been my goal, is that for some races you'll have up to 5 splits and that you'll never have less than 2. And that way, to your point exactly, Wade, is the talent disbursement is good. And you feel like everybody in the race feels like, they're fighting for not only just positions on the track, but potentially top 5s and podiums. So that's the goal.
I hesitate to ask, John. I already know. How did the race go for you, or what was your take on the race? Is maybe a better way to ask the question.
Yeah, so my personal race was a complete disaster. I had a PC crash on lap 3 or something, and then I got the infamous iRacing permanent meatball bug. So I was game over by lap 5 or something, which was disappointing because Spa is my best track and I was really competitive. The rest of the race looked really good. Marco Mogren is insanely fast in anything on road, so he dominated. But the midfield fight was really, really good and fun to watch. So I think it went pretty well.
So to just kind of wrap things up on this, if we think about the global reach, started with a couple years. Mike, what's your general take on it? Like, are you happy with the growth you've seen and the racing that you've seen with this expansion from just the worldwide major?
Right. A sort of a double-edged sword, to be honest. And so the overall answer is yes, and the overall answer is absolutely. I wouldn't change the direction. That's always been the goal forever, is to grow it. That said, for the first, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 races of this year, we actually had lower overall participation than through the same period of time last year. So that was a little worrisome, to be honest. And most of that probably could be attributed to the fact that we merged Atlantic and Pacific, and a lot of the guys that raced in Atlantic, although it was a fairly small region, they didn't feel like they had a home. They chose Atlantic because Pacific was too late for them. It was starting at 6 p.m. Pacific time last year, which was 9 p.m. there. So we backed it up only an hour. So some of them who felt like they had to work on Mondays still didn't have a spot. And then European region being earlier in the morning or earlier in the day on a Sunday, maybe they had things to do with their families or whatever. So I think we lost some folks due to that. But I really had to make that choice because the region just wasn't populated enough, and we needed to just go ahead and bite the bullet on it. But so that was a little worrisome at the beginning of the year, but we've gotten bigger and bigger and bigger since then, and obviously we've had some record numbers in the last 2 out of 3 races. So that's been good to see. But the downside, or the flip side to the whole worldwide thing, is that when we were just the Pacific Majors, and I know a lot of the people that have been with us this whole time sort of lament this occasionally, is that it felt more tight knit. It felt more like you knew everybody that you were racing. Um, it felt more exclusive for sure, because it was. I mean, you had to be either in one club or 2 out of 3, out of the 3 clubs, and then eventually it expanded to 5 clubs. But basically, you had to reside in the western half of the United States to even participate, and so that created sort of this feeling of exclusivity, which is, it's one of those reverse psychology things where if you feel like you can't be a part of something, you really want to be a part of something, you really want to be a part of it. And then when it's opened up to everybody, sometimes people are like, oh, well, it's not so special anymore. Do I really want to still be a part of it? Well, the good news is that it has grown and our membership numbers are really healthy. But it does lack those 2 things, the exclusivity piece, and necessarily knowing who you're racing with each and every week. And so those are things that, honestly, we're constantly talking about in the committee is, how do you balance that in terms of growing the series, making more people, bringing in newcomers, while at the same time not discounting the people that have been around for a long time. So anyway, that's a really long, convoluted answer, but it's something that was always on our mind in terms of how do we keep that balance. And got a couple good ideas for next year, I hope, I think, and excited to roll those out.
So speaking of the competition committee, John, you're part of that. So I know you wear a lot of hats on our race team, but you also wear a lot of hats on the major series team with the competition committee. Tell us about that? What do you look forward to this year, next year? What kind of discussions are you having? Just kind of open the door to that for the rest of the.
Yeah, the big thing I was involved in this year was the restrictions we put on the way, particularly the bigger teams work, and the way we can build the teams in the series. And I think that's worked pretty well. There is some concern about how the big teams, and particularly in America, um, Alliance and Kinetic, and increasingly now Unorthodox, are dominating the pro splits. So we want to try and make that look better if we can. But I'm pretty happy with the way things have gone. If you look at the championship this year in the teams, it's pretty tight in Americas, and much more so than last year. Last year Alliance dominated, and we were sort of hanging on to their coattails, and no one else was close. This year, that lots of people are close. So I think it's worked. It's worked pretty good. And although we were worried about some of the things that people had said on Discord and stuff when we did the survey, actually the majority of people seem pretty happy with the way the teams are working at the moment. There were some negative comments, of course, but you always expect that. But in general, people seem to be happy, so it's cool, I think.
Yeah. So speaking of that survey, I know there was discussion on Discord, but I would love to know from Mike or what did we really get out of that? What big ideas do you have for next year that came out of that, or can you open up the box on that as well?
John, if you want to take first crack, you're welcome to, and I can fill in the blanks. Or
Yeah, I can talk about it. I think in general the feedback was pretty positive. If there were two sort of sets of questions. There was questions asking people for ratings on stuff, and all of that is pretty damn good. Um, there were also sections where there were lots of comments, and in that you always get a big variation of people saying good stuff, people saying bad stuff, and we will respond to that. But I think in general the feedback was really positive. Um, but we need to do some work, and we need to make sure everyone understands what our response to that is.
Yeah, for sure. And I agree totally. I think that the overall, when you look at it holistically, the feedback was positive for sure. And I think one of the phrases that comes to my mind when you look at the survey results and you compare it to what you sort of hear and see throughout the year, and that is the term vocal minority. So there's a lot of times that you'll hear folks talking about particular topics. Fast repair is a really good one. A lot of times you'll only hear people complaining about fast repair. You almost never ever hear somebody saying that they like it, at least out loud, because they don't feel like they have to because it's already there, right? And so, but that whole process makes you wonder and question, well, gosh, should we have a spare car available to people? Because there's, every time we turn around, somebody's complaining about it. And I get the complaint, by the way. I would prefer not to have one. If I thought the damage model was where it needed to be, and everything that was repairable on a real car was repairable on our cars, and things like what happened to John even last night didn't happen from a bug perspective. All those things would make us lean towards not having one. But just that one question, for example, 134 responses, 66% of the people who answered said they would like to have one spare car. It's a really big number, by the way. Only 25% indicated that they wanted 0 fast repair. So that means the remaining, whatever, 10% wanted more than one spare car. So 75% of the respondents wanted at least one spare car. So again, vocal minority is something that we have to be aware of anytime we're listening to feedback throughout the year. And that's why one of the reasons that when we send out this yearly survey, that we say, look, this is your real chance to give us feedback. We appreciate feedback all year round, and we'll take it. And sometimes we get really great ideas from those, but this is where we can kind of coalesce all of those things into our actual vision for the future. So that's one example of why we do the survey, number one, and an example of a result. The other one, just to piggyback on what John was saying, we had overall satisfaction with the series, 4.16 average out of 5. Not bad. Obviously, would love that number to be even higher. Among season pass holders, the season pass value, because we did raise the price to $40 this year, so that's always a concern. Frankly, I had to do that. But the average score was 4.17 out of 5 on season pass value. Again, I'm really happy with that. More than 50% of the respondents gave that a 5 out of 5. So 50% of the people felt like they're getting really good value for their money. So that makes me feel good. I do like that. Now, conversely, when you look at the non-season pass holders, people who are not currently season pass holders, those numbers are inverted quite a lot, where season pass value is not seen as good. So that's something that we've got to continue to work towards, making people feel like I really have to have that because all of the different perks and benefits that come along with it. Of course, and as most people know by now, we're not going to have true free membership next year. You're going to have to pay, whether that's via season pass or a race fee. So we've got to do as good a job as we can between now and then of proving the value to folks, because it's going to be paramount into our numbers for next year. What other questions did you have on the survey itself, Wade, if any?
Well, one that's kind of popped up, and I don't know if it was exactly in the survey, but popped up here in the stream chat, is just around thought of quote unquote ringer, the one-time race kind of guys. I could go on and on and on. The fact that that's how I started, and I'm still here, and I'm really happy to be here. But I'd love to get your take on that, and just kind of an idea of around how you manage the rules and the expectations of the current members, and with also the thought of how do we grow the league on a stay.
Yeah, that's great. And we've sort of addressed how we're going to handle that in the future, but it's a good opportunity for me to sort of explain why, and how we've gotten to the point where we are and what we're going to do in the future. So ringers is if the survey in general was sort of an example of vocal minority outside of the survey, the idea of ringers is really a good example of perception versus reality. And the perception is that ringers come in and they dominate races, and they make it not fun for the folks who are invested in and are here all the time. And there are occasions where ringers come in and they win races. That does happen for sure. But to suggest that ringers dominate the series in any way, shape, or form is way not true. Not even close. But that said, the perception is there, and we want to make sure that the folks that are loyal to the series and have invested in the series feel like that they're not being undercut by someone who has none of those things. And I agree with them. We want to protect that. And so, like I said, next year we won't have any free races, so there won't truly be. I mean, if anybody wants to race, they're going to have to pay at least a race fee to participate. They won't necessarily have to buy a full season pass. We'll still allow people to race on a one-off basis, but they'll have to be at least committed enough to pay for that week. So that's going to reduce the number of people who are willing to do so, number one. Number two, I think that it will greatly increase the number of those folks who then turn into committed series members, like yourself. And you're a great example. Riley Thompson, somebody I talked about who's in the qualifying session right now, is a perfect example. Somebody who came in just for the camel race last year. Our opener, it happened to be the opening round, so that was good. But he's a camel regular and really strong in that series. But he won race in our series, and he was hooked, and he stuck around. Liam Quinn on Kinetic is another good example. Somebody who raced just the 2 IndyCar races last year and is now a full-time member. So we could go on and on and on with those examples. And the really, really important thing is that we don't want to take that away. We don't want to take away the opportunity for people to try us out and to join us, because anybody who looks at our series from outside, if you aren't naturally inclined to race everything on the iRacing service, you're going to look at our schedule and say, whoa, that's too much. Or you're going to be intimidated. You're going to think that's too much content I have to buy. I can't commit to this series. And so it's difficult to get people to do that. So it's good to be able to have that tryout period. And so for 2 years, we've allowed the whole world to try us out for free, no charge, and the good news is that a large portion of those people do buy season passes and or end up staying with us. And a lot of people don't, and that's okay. We kind of flesh that out as time goes by. But next year, I think that we'll see that while we'll still have people who race with us one time, the perception will be diminished greatly, that ringers are having an impact on the series, because there will be less of them, and they will all be contributing at least.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I agree with 100%. I first started looking at the majors. There were a lot of guys on our team doing it, and I said, well, I'm not naturally fast. It requires a lot of time and effort, practice to. I am kind of mid-pack. And I said, I'm really only good in one car, and I'd be really good in that car and everywhere if I stick to it. This jumping from car to car to car to car, that's just. But what I found is that I am better in every car by jumping from car to car to car, because you learn something learn something about some new way of handling the car or setting up the car or just handling traffic. It's amazing.
Awesome. Agreed. Totally.
So now that I've pumped up your ego, made you feel good about this, I want to put you on the spot. Name the top 3 drivers into the season for.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, let me bring up my standings. I'm gonna cheat a little bit.
While he's thinking about that, John, I've got one for you too. Start thinking about teams.
Yeah, I'm a bit biased on that, but of course I'll try my best.
Sorry, I'm getting there. America's is going to be very interesting, by the way. My takes on that might be, I don't know if they'll be controversial, but they'll be interesting nonetheless. But still bring it. It's loading. Sorry.
That's all right. We'll skip over to John and come back to you.
Yeah, I can probably start, Mike, if you need a couple of minutes to think. Okay, so international teams. Kinetic's obviously really strong again this year, and although we had a bit of a hiccup yesterday at Spa, we've still got a really strong lead in the championship. Illusion are getting stronger and stronger, and I think that they'll finish second. The weird thing in international is that there's some sportsman teams that are really strong as well, and both RCD and MF Racing haven't really got any stars, but they're really, really consistent and they're accumulating points really well. I think MF Racing will finish, will win Sportsman, and they'll probably be the second highest scoring team in the international region at the end of the year. So that's so Kinetic, MF Racing, and Illusion are my top three picks in international. Americas. Well, no, let's do Europe first. Europe, Kinetic are really dominating. You know, we set up a very strong team at the beginning of the year, and then we had Christian decide that he was going to switch to Europe as well. So we let me put it this way: I was pretty confident at the beginning of the year that Kinetic would be the strongest team in Europe, and that's the way it's proved. They're pretty comfortably ahead of everybody and getting further ahead every race. And you know, Christian is just amazingly good in every car, and you know he's a banker for a top 5 place pretty much every race. So that looks good for Kinetic in Europe. But Bombshell are really strong as well. They've been very consistent, and they've got a bunch of good drivers, so they score points really well. The rest of the teams are more difficult to tell because a lot of the teams below Kinetic and Bombshell are good at either road or oval. And if you look at their points, they're up and down like crazy. So I think the strongest team, apart from Kinetic and Bombshell, are probably Total Downforce. But their points have been all over the place. But I still think that by the end of the year they'll be third. So, but we'll see. Americas is obviously the most interesting one. Alliance are ahead, and I expect them to win the championship. Kinetic have done much better than I expected us to do. Way better. I thought that we'd struggle to get a top 5, and we're second at the moment. I still think that that's going to be difficult to maintain because the second half of the year is outside our comfort zone mostly, and I think there's teams that are catching up fast and recovering. So I think that the top 3 will be Alliance, and then probably Unorthodox. And I'm not saying that just because Steve's here, but they're getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And I think that there's a good chance that they'll catch Kinetic, and we'll finish third.
Well, I'll piggyback on that for a real quick second, and then I'll talk about the individuals. But I think your points on the international and the European region team-wise were all right on. And I would just add that in both regions, there are established teams that are either have kind of dipped their toe into the major series or have a driver or two that have dipped their toe into the major series, but their teams as a whole have not. The tipping point for me for those regions, both from a participation standpoint and from a competition standpoint, are when the when a significant portion of all of the currently established teams in those regions join. You know, whether it's the Torque Freaks or whatever, there is a huge number, right? You know, we're talking 10, 15, 20 teams that should, in my opinion, have an interest in joining. There's no reason. The series is good enough, way good enough to provide them with an immense amount of competition. It's right up their alley, and that's something we've got to do a better job of attracting. And then Kinetic could have a little more competition in those two regions from a team perspective. In the Americas region, I think that you're probably right on your top 3. And I would just say that if both Riding Shotgun and Elite West had done a better job in terms of the setup of the team prior to the season and made the moves that they were able to within the windows that are allowed, they could have had their strongest teams set up for much greater success. I mean, RSM has 3 teams. They're spread out. They don't have full participation any week. And that's a real challenge. Obviously, you need to score 3 drivers every week, and you need to have them strong. So I think they did their best. They brought in a lot of new folks, and I think Riding Shotgun is really well set up to be strong into the future. If they can just tweak their rosters a little bit, and Elite West same way. Their number 2 team is actually their strongest team points wise right now, and if they had made those adjustments when they could, they would probably be fighting it out for the championship, let alone the podium.
Yeah, the way we changed the teams this year, it was difficult to really appreciate how those restrictions on changes were gonna impact people, and for sure, Elite West got it wrong in some of the assumptions that they made on how to set the teams up, and yeah, they could have been a lot stronger than they were.
Yeah, if you just look at their combined point totals, which obviously doesn't tell the full story, but it gives you an idea of potential, right? So they're right there for the future, hopefully. So I guess what I'm just saying is that, in Americas, you're looking at not only is the championship better this year for the teams than it has been before, but it's set up to be even better. And then even, and that's taking out Dog Bear, where, they pride themselves not necessarily on having, all the black stripes in the world, but just being really strong. And when they sort of merged with Mountain West, they did become doubly strong. They still need maybe that 1 or 2 drivers that is, top 5, top 10 driver each week sort of guy, but they've got a whole bunch that are in the top 10 to top 20 sort of range. And their consistency and their participation and their attendance is sort of what keeps them in it every round. And so I think next year we're going to have 6, 7 teams that are legitimately fighting for number 1, which is obviously what your goal is that keeps people uber interested the whole time. But with regard to the international or the individual, as far as the international region is concerned, I think, I hate to call it like this, but I would say that unless, Cam loses interest, he's pretty much going to win the championship. He's had a great season, and our next round is on his specialty. So, we'll be 10 rounds in, and we'll have done the dirt round. So it'll be interesting to see how clear he is after that. I think Robert Northway is really consistent points wise, and I think Dean Mole will probably finish 3rd at the end of the day. So that would be my pick in international. As for European, I mean, Christian is pretty hard to bet against, and it's a host of kinetic drivers with him, leading the charge. Whether it's Matthias or Gabe or Yao or whomever. They're all sort of wingmen for Christian. So I would say Christian he came really close to winning the championship with Blake last year. He's now crested 10 wins in the series overall, which is super impressive. Only 2 people have done that, himself and Blake. So I would say he would be a very deserving champion if he finishes it out. My worry with both him and Blake, although my worry is actually less with Christian than it is with Blake, but is that with Peak being so important, and I don't blame him, with $100,000 on the line, that focus could be taken away from other series that they might run. Now, Christian seems to have his interests all over the place in terms of what he's running, while it seems like Blake might be laser focused on Peak right now. It's just my outside perception, by the way. It's not, nobody's telling me that. It's just kind of what I see. So anyway, but as those guys get closer and closer to the end of that season and the money becomes real, I wonder, if their focus wouldn't shift, and again, wouldn't blame them, and that would be the only opportunity for somebody to jump in and steal the championship away from somebody like Christian. Otherwise, I think he's really looking strong. Although it's been neat to see some of the other guys jump up. Outside of the kinetic group, Kurt Crum is a really versatile driver, good in everything. Josh Wolf's really good all around. I would say they have a chance to fight for a podium potentially. Again, it'd be and as I mentioned before, Riley Thompson, Ocean Walsh from TDR. John mentioned TDR a little bit. They've been up and down in terms of their performance, but their potential, their skill, talent is absolutely there, no question. If they can just harness it into some consistent finishes, they would be a force for sure. I would expect them to be going forward. And as other clubs, or not clubs, as other teams branch out into the other regions and build teams to sort of bolster their lineups, I think you'll see that get better and better. But as of right now, I think you may have a kinetic sweep in the top three in the standings. And then for Americas, so Blake's led, right now basically wire to wire, 7 rounds in. He's the defending champion. He worked really hard to get his championship last year. That said, it wouldn't surprise me if he doesn't win this year, and it won't have anything to do with his ability. Obviously, with I think 16 wins in the series overall, can pretty much perform in anything. Again, I would just go back to where's his focus at, and is it in peak or is it majors, and is he able to focus on both? And historically, he has. So props to him for that. But he has had a little bit of a backslide the last few races, and we've seen an interesting thing happen where obviously Matthew Thunhorse has had a really good season. He jumped up into second and has now slipped into third. But you look at a couple of drivers that really are interesting to me: Eric Smith, Liam Quinn, and Travis Warling in the top 5. Travis finished third last year, sort of an anonymous third, if you will, but obviously showed that he was more than capable of doing really well in the series, and he got a win last round in Detroit. Liam is, again, while we knew he was good at Indy, has proved to be good all around. And Eric Smith, it was in the Atlantic region last year, and he won many times last season. And you wondered, would that carry over into the stronger overall Americas region? And it absolutely has. He is in contention to win week in and week out. As a matter of fact, if he hasn't had some poor late race either luck or finishes, he would be even closer, if not leading the championship overall. So the neat thing there is that you've got 5 different teams represented in the top 5, and I honestly think that any of those 5 drivers could win the championship at the end of the season. So I wouldn't even rank them. I literally think it could be any of the 5, and it could be in any order. And it wouldn't surprise me one bit. I do think it'll come down to the very last race, and I think it will be unknown going into it.
Tune in Sunday nights to GSRC iRacing East Network, right?
Absolutely. You're better. You're better at brevity than me, and you'll never invite me back on, I'm sure. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Tune in. They do a great.
You brought up Travis Warling as a wouldn't call it a dark horse. He's right there. He's part of Unorthodox Racing, who has been just on fire. I'm happy to welcome Steve Driscoll to the booth here to talk about Unorthodox. Welcome to the booth.
Heidi ho, how are you doing tonight? I'm ready to talk some shop and have some fun on the broadcast. Welcome for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks for showing up on episode 1. It's been a little bumpy, but we'll get through it.
I've been on many bumpy roads in my life, so this hasn't been too bad.
So speaking of bumpy roads, you guys killed it in Detroit last round, and that was a super bumpy road I don't ever want to go back to.
Yeah, I gotta say, Detroit. The key point I think a lot of people went to was it was the setup base and the practice. Travis and myself, we focused probably a good month on the setup on there, and what we found was simply a lot of people had really soft front springs on there because I want to make everybody better and help everybody out. So I'm not too secretive with setups or secrets for this sort of stuff. But what I found at Detroit was actually having a really stiff front end, and working on the dampers really allowed for more front grip, and using the aerodynamic advantage is what was key for Detroit.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and to be honest, that's where I think the VR and learning, at least I was in VR, so it helped a lot to get around seeing the AFP in front of you. You kind of ignored that it was there, but it allowed me to really focus in on, how close to the wall I could get and hitting the apexes. And Travis is just, he's kind of the assassin on the team. He's kind of quiet, but he'll come out of nowhere and put in a good performance. And it was good to see him finally, recover from the first race mistake and come back in the second one and really show us what we had.
You guys were definitely the class of the Americas region. Tell me more about Unorthodox Racing. How are you guys? Where are you from? What did you do? How'd you get together? What's your story?
Yeah, so I think Mike and John touched about it a little bit earlier. We're kind of the success story of the majors draft system. We started off as the precision and unorthodox racing out of the draft from 2018. We just worked together and finally merged after the 2018 season because we saw we needed to find a way to tackle the juggernauts of the series, right? And with that, we came together and decided, why don't we merge and see if the philosophies on the teams are the same? Are we about getting drivers that care versus the fastest drivers? We were about getting people that wanted to participate, and we'll help coach. We'll get them up to speed, coach them how to do setups. We felt like we were trying to help the little guys that felt intimidated against the kinetics and the alliances of the world. Because for some of us, some of the guys have never raced against really great competition, had to battle to them. Luckily, with my GT Academy experience, I was used to battling the Blakes of the worlds in various tournaments. So it was nice to help bring those guys up that want to compete with the Blakes of the world and let them come up and show what they really had in sim racing. So, like with Unorthodox, we came together and pretty much Matt Gelder and myself, we were the owners of the two teams. We came together in right around December. And actually, we got to thank John King and a couple others that in the series, especially Jason Fleishley of Alliance. They really helped us, try to create the draft and the setup of the team to help us merge correctly and how to use our resources effectively, so we could tackle and become better as a team. So it was really great in this year seeing how we had kind of a rough start where we were trying to find where it was best to utilize practice time, even livery building, getting sponsors to help out with, testing time to pay for this, for our sessions. But it's come out really great, and I gotta also say Lynn Kinchelow, his paint schemes are kinda unique, and I think it's allowed us to kinda stick out from the field with our, Tron setups that we usually have.
They are definitely impressive. So I do the paints for Kinetic, and I sometimes dread the majors because we're traditionally a GT team, and so every week, yeah, his paints are amazing. Blown away every time I get a new one.
Yeah, that was actually one of the biggest things when, we were Precision. It was I was trying to do it all. I was doing the setups, paints, everything like that, so even just having another resource to do paints, that saved me 2, 3 days of painting to make it look right, so it was great to have this merge, and I think it's really worked out great, and yeah, Lynn's a lot better artist than I am. I'm more of just an engineer. I just, put stuff on there and see what happens.
Can I just jump in on one thing that Steve said about the draft? We probably should have covered that when we were talking about the survey. Um, that was one section of the survey that was a little bit disappointing and has been disappointing the last couple of years. Um, there were lots of comments about the draft being not very useful and a pain because people sign up for the draft and then don't participate with the team, and you don't know who you're getting, blah blah blah. And I think you know Steve alluded to this with theirs, and we've done the same in Kinetic, where we've accepted it for what it is, and we take guys on, and we know that there's going to be some dropouts because people lose interest, but the ones that we've got, and we've had a similar experience to Steve. The ones that we've got have been fantastic. Our if you look at our European junior team, there's 3 guys in that, and they are all from the draft, and they're second in the sportsman class, and they've all become regular members of Kinetic now. So I'd really encourage people to think carefully about the draft and how it can be used, and take a chance. Yes, you're going to get people that sign up and then don't participate in the team, but there's some real diamonds in there if you're prepared to put the effort into to helping people.
Yeah, and I just want to touch base a little bit more on that too. I've made some lifelong friends with the groups, the people that I've joined in here, and that's part of what really attracted me to the majors was that, and that's what iRacing I think misses on is having that team base and actually working to one single goal. And I just love how the majors kind of facilitated that through the draft, and I really appreciate Mike and the committee for actually coming up with that idea and running with it.
Awesome.
So looking forward the rest of the year here, are there rounds that you guys are really excited for, and transversely things you're not quite ready for?
Well, for us, I think we're kind of dreading the Lotus 49 and a bit of Michigan because we just don't know what to expect with those two. I think the Kings Royal is going to be kind of the fun one. It's a wild card, but we don't all know what to expect. And, it's always kind of fun to sling the mud around. And it's a wild card because the events are so short, the heats are so short. You could have a great car in qualifying in one of the heats and never make it to the A or B main because you just get knocked to the back. The ones we're really looking forward to are probably Bathurst and Interlagos. Myself, Travis, Kevin Hill, we do a really bang up job on trying to get setups made, and I think we're mainly a road based team, so I think those two are the ones we're kind of looking forward to.
So looking a little farther out, have you guys started thinking about next year? I mean, we're only halfway through, but have plans? Are you expanding? Are you shrinking? What's new or upcoming for unorthodox?
Well, for unorthodox racing, we've already discussed what's going to start happening for the next year. Is we're going to try to, I guess, change, not really expand, but maybe take on a couple other drivers that want to be a part of us, or maybe look into bringing on a smaller team that doesn't have the resources like us that want to join into the fun that we have, right? Is we work together, 2 weeks in advance. But the big thing I think we're just kind of working on right now is just breathing in the possibility of doing some more official racing as well. So we could kind of get better at setups with different various cars and become a little bit more antiquated with these cars so we can learn instead of one race per season on a particular car, we'll have three or four to kind of get an idea of what that car is going to do through a long run. But for the most part, the team's kind of going to stay right around the same size. But we're just kind of putting it out there that, for the smaller guys that are in a team of one or a team of two, that, most of their team left for the draft is we're always willing to help out. And, it can be an official merge or not. That's kind of what we're about. We want to make the community happy and, help the guys get faster because, it's fun to race against, 35 competitive cars every week.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us again this episode, sitting through the bumps in the road here. We hope to have you back sometime soon.
Yeah, yeah, I really appreciate it. And I just want to throw a shout out to a couple of our sponsors, Direct Innovations, Simability, and the Extra Life charity that we're all a part of and unorthodox. And I just really appreciate the opportunity and thanks for having us on.
All right, thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
So we'll move on. This podcast is presented by Kinetic Racing, and so uh, now I get to ask John some questions. First off, I guess John, maybe you can just give our listeners an idea of who Kinetic is, where we came from, kind of the same thing.
Yeah, so historically, what happened is most of us, or the founder members of Kinetic, were in a team called Blackadder Motorsport, um, and Blackadder was formed like 6 years ago, mainly out of the GTC series. But we grew and grew and grew and grew, and at one point we got to nearly 100 members, and it became unmanageable, and we imploded at the end of 2017, and a few of us, and probably Wade and I were the main instigators, decided that we wanted to set up a team that was focused on proto GT endurance racing, and so we did, and we said that we were going to limit the team to around 30 permanent drivers, and we've pretty much done that. But of course, I said that we wanted to focus on Proto GT. So running in the majors is just weird for us. But we had such a good time at the beginning of last year. It just became a thing and just got bigger and bigger within the team.
Yeah, how did we find the major?
Well, we had a couple of guys that were in Kinetic at the start of last year, like Ernie Ludwig that had run in the old Pack Major series, and I've had a long relationship with Mike on the iRacing World Cup, and when Mike was going to make the majors a global series, he asked me to be part of the CC for that. So when we went global, um, I I signed up for that, and Ernie signed up for it, and because we did it, a few other people got interested as well, and then we participated in the draft as well, and got a few more guys in, and it just sort of snowballed from there. And as you said earlier, Wade, we had this theory that you needed to be focused on one or two cars. Um, but what we quickly discovered was exactly what you said, that by jumping from car to car to car, you actually learn a whole bunch at the same time. And we had a huge amount of fun as well. So it just got bigger and bigger, and it's crazy now.
Do we have any plans for next year? Changes? Changes in direction or focus?
Um, I don't know, to be honest. I have thought about it, but I think just on some numbers, we've got 31 people participating as Kinetic drivers in the majors, and then we've also got people like Marco Mogren, who isn't really a Kinetic member. He's not listed as Kinetic on in the majors teams, but he hangs out with us, and he ran the Kinetic scheme on his car in the last couple of rounds. So we've probably got we've actually got as many people in the majors as we have got permanent members of Kinetic. So we certainly won't get any bigger, I don't think. And I think there are people that want to be focused on other stuff as well. So I think you'll see something similar next year, but maybe a little bit more streamlined. So I think somewhere in that sort of 25 to 30 range is right, and we'll definitely be spread amongst the three regions where we're all over the place in the world. So we we definitely will stay as we are with running in all the regions.
Yeah, for sure. Being a global team, I think, is a huge advantage for us. There are a lot of guys on our team. Speaking of Dean Mole, here in the States, but he races national, and the fact that he can race in his what works for him, and still be part of the team.
Yeah, of course, Dean's a slightly funny situation where he's actually not a full member of Kinetic, although I'm trying to twist his arm to become one. So he's like a guest in the team, but he races for us in the majors because we enjoyed so much racing with him last year in international that we invited him to join us this year, and he's been absolutely brilliant. He's contributed a whole bunch of the points for the team this year. So we've got and Christian is sort of the same. He's an associate member, so he's actually a member of another team for some other events, but he's part of Kinetic for the majors, and that helps us a lot as well.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you to kind of break down. We have full members, we have associate members, guests. Covered it. Read my mind. We only have a couple minutes here left. Anything you want to end on here? I see Vince is out on track trying to pick up his time. Fortunately, I didn't upload a Audi paint for him, but seems to be getting it done.
Cool. Anything that helps us move up the grid in international in Americas is going to be useful, because this is probably the last round where we're really in our comfort zone this year. So we'll see.
Would I be able to chime in with a question if that's all right?
Yeah, go for it.
So as there are some smaller guys in the team that, it's an accomplishment to make the pro split. And sometimes, the guys that do the broadcast do an amazing job at trying to do the best they can with knowing the guys. Is there something some of these guys can do to help, accentuate the broadcaster's knowledge of their driver or their team to kind of help Joe and the guys during the broadcast? I'm just thinking that's some area that some of the other smaller guys might not know what to do or how to help themselves out.
Yeah, I'll take a crack at it and let John answer too. So basically, all of the broadcasters, but really in particular, GSRC and SimSpeed, really welcome any information that we can give them. That information does not have to be funneled through myself or John or Wayne or any of that. It can go directly to. So if you go to the GSRC Discord channel or private message to Joe or Soup or anybody, little tidbits of information. They do a really good job of conveying that on broadcast. They want to have stories to tell. We want to have stories to tell. I definitely that's one of the areas that I want to be better at is telling the stories of our drivers because I think that's kind of what makes it compelling. And but again, every member, every driver can participate in that. Anybody can share information, and we really encourage them to do that.
Yep, I agree with that. It is difficult for the broadcasters because they obviously know a bunch of people, and it's easy for them to focus on those guys. But as Mike said, Joe and the other guys are really welcome in when if you send them some extra information. So I just encourage everyone to do that.
Great, thanks for that. I think that'll help out some of the guys out there on the grid, and I just appreciate your time.
No problem.
All right, so final chance qualifying has wrapped up. I got to let Mike and John go. They got to go set the grids for tomorrow. I would just want to thank you guys for tuning in, and thank again John, Mike, and Steve for being a part of this first episode.
Yeah, thanks Wade for doing it. Thanks John for kind of being the catalyst to make it happen. So appreciate it. Really cool.
Cool, and we'll see everyone in 3 weeks' time. We'll do the same again.
Thanks for having us on.
All right, catch you guys.